things I would share to normalize.
Yes.
So that people know everybody gets stressed, and we all have our moments that we don't do well.
I think about it. All right, welcome into another episode of For Your Health, the podcast sponsored by Roane General Hospital. We're talking all things prescription for your health, all things health and wellness, and the goal of this is to improve the quality of life for every single individual in Roane County. I'm your host, Andrew Miller. To my right, and I assume to the left of your screen, is somebody who has been at this for quite a while, and I wanted to read this. Normally I don't read while I'm on the camera, but the background is important for this conversation. I am joined by Susan Greathouse, who is a licensed clinical social worker and medical fitness class instructor here at Roane General Hospital in the Fitness Center. Susan has over 40 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, providing therapy services for adults, families, and children. Additionally, she has integrated her education and experience into overall health and wellness, including serving as a yoga teacher for over 20 years, and recently specializing in mobility and balance medical fitness classes. As a formal social worker, Susan has years of resources related to stress management, day-to-day challenges, and healthy lifestyle choices. Susan is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force and previously worked at the local state hospital. When I read that, Susan, I just think of the wealth of knowledge that runs through your head that you have had for so many years. First, before I do anything else, I want to thank you for joining us here today.
No problem. I'm very happy and privileged to be here.
So as I read that background to you, does it seem like a blip in your life, or does it seem like it's been the 40 years?
Well, now that I'm retired, it seems like a blimp. When I was in it, no, it felt like the 40 years, and that's why I had to get out, because of stress. You have to take care of yourself. Stress is very important for you to manage, and I had reached my limit, and I needed to retire, and I did, and it was a good choice.
Well, you had many years of work when it comes to this in different aspects, as we talked about here, different types of services that you've provided over the many years. Let's take it back to before you started your career. Did you feel something as a youngster or growing up in your formative years that led you to think that path that you took was one that you really truly wanted to do? Was there anything in your life that you just felt, I feel the need to help people in this
Absolutely. As a small child, I wanted to always be in the helping profession, but I grew up in a very small rural town, and the only thing I knew was either teacher or nurse, and neither one of them struck me as what I wanted to do. But in high school, I was looking at my consulars, all the different career options, and I picked it up on one on social work and said, that's me. That's what I want to do. And every decision I made from that point on was to become a social worker, including going to the Air Force. I was a farmer's daughter, and we lost our farm when I was a senior, and there's no money for me to go to their college, so I went to the Air Force to get the GI Bill. And then once I was out of the Air Force, I used my GI Bill to get both my bachelor's and master's degree.
That's the way to go about it. If you do your time in the Air Force and the military, and you get the benefits from it, and you utilize those obviously very well. It's interesting that you said that social work was something that kind of lit a fire under you, because that is a hard profession.
Yes.
It's you're going to see things and hear things and have to deal with things that are beyond the pale for a lot of people.
Yes.
And yet that was the thing that really sparked you. Why would that be? That's so interesting.
Well, there's some people that are natural helpers. My family and friends always came to me, and it was just something natural, and I did. I have a real desire to work with people. I grew up without a lot, and I could identify and empathize with people that don't have a lot going for them. But if you take control of your life, you can make it what you want. And I want to help people learn that.
So you go through the Air Force, you get the GI Bill, and you go to school. Let's talk about your your actual qualifications. Where did you go to school, and how did you get the qualifications, and what type do you have?
I went to Glenville State College. I commuted there for 3 years because the Air Force gives you college credit for your different training you get. And I got a bachelor's in social work, and then I went to the state hospital for three and a half years. And when the first time they threatened to close it down, when Norton Jones, yeah, and all of that, I thought, I need to get out of here. And I went down to Shawnee Hills Mental Health Center in Charleston. And at that time, WVU had a Charleston Center down at CMC. And I got my master's in social work at night and on the weekends while I worked in Charleston.
So the topic that we are going to discuss today is probably one of the most important when we're talking about the overall health and wellness of a human being, and that is stress.
Yes.
And stress management.
Yes.
Positive forms of stress, negative forms of stress. There's so much to talk about. There's so much information, but it is such an important topic because to truly be the best version of yourself, I think that you have to figure out ways to manage. I don't think you can eliminate stress. And in fact, you
Absolutely
probably don't
not.
want to eliminate all of it. But as an adult and as a professional in the field that I'm in, I do understand the feeling of stress, being overstressed,
Right.
and trying to figure out ways not just to manage it, but to limit it and to use it for the positive. And so let's go to the core of the issue first off. What is stress?
Well, stress is actually just pressure or tension exerted on an object, and of course that's it. And you hit the high points of it because there's distress and eustress. Eustress is actually good. It's like when we're planning our wedding and you're stressed out, but it's a good kind of stress.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting ready to run that race. That stress pumps you up, so you really, really run fast. You're preparing for an exam. That stress helps you really focus in and concentrate and do well on that exam. So not all stress is bad, and nobody ever goes through life without stress. You know, and especially I think in this day and age, it is not a laid-back time. I feel when I was a child, it was pretty laid back compared to what my children have grown up with, because we were just aware of so much out in the world. And I've had little children have anxiety over wars, you know, and because they're just so bombarded with it. And so stress is part of our life. So it's just like anything else. You manage it. You don't get rid of it. You don't control it. You manage it. And so and it's so important to realize that is one of the most important things we can do for our health, because a lot of the results of stress, long-term chronic stress, can be headaches, muscle tension, insomnia, anxiety, depression, difficulty concentrating, high blood pressure, irritability, aches and pains, heart disease, diabetes, appetite changes, weight gain, obesity, eczema, fatigue, alcohol or drug use, low libido, you know, chronic inflammation, difficulty making decisions, and disorganized thinking. I mean, that's huge.
When I sit there and listen to that list, that is just, it's overwhelming.
Yes.
The things that as you said, the negative stresses.
Yes, this is just distress. This is from chronic distress.
Yeah.
If we don't manage it and we allow it to come. And then I just had a new stress consequence that I didn't know before, and I personally had it, as your hair fall out. Last year, my husband's been sick for years. His heart quit beating, and he fell to the floor. And luckily, his heart went back into rhythm and everything. And I thought, okay, that's just another thing. I'm not going to worry about it, you know. But 3 months later, I go to my doctor, and I tell him my hair's fallen out. And he says, "What? Did you have a stressful event 3 months ago?" You know, and, well, yeah, I did. You know, and so you can think in your head, I got it under control, but you cannot fool your body.
Yeah.
As you see, this list are all physical things. These things will affect your body. So you can't fool stress. You really have to pay attention to yourself and see those changes in your functioning so that you can look at what's going on. And we're going to talk about holistically, because stress comes from us in all different categories and stuff.
When I listen to the list of things that physically, mentally, emotionally cause problems, when you talk about distress for so long of a prolonged period of time, when I think back to some of the podcasts we've done, let's say with like Dr. Dejani or Dr. Frankie, who's a cardiologist, talking with a few others, and they're talking about comorbidities and things that cause other things. And when we're talking about trying to be the best version of yourself, when we talk about prescription for your health, we truly mean physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all these different versions that try to come together to become the best version of yourself and have the best quality of life. And I do believe that stress is one of those things that people have, whether intentionally or unintentionally, just said, "No, I'm just dealing with it. I'm just dealing with it."
Yeah.
And that's not dealing with it,
No,
right?
exactly, and that's what you end up with, these physical ailments. Yeah, you have to face it, and it doesn't make us weak; it makes us human. And I'm just like you talked about being a social worker for that many years. It was a very stressful job, and I had many ways I managed it. And I did well with it until something stressful in my home life.
Yeah.
And then I had overload. And, and so you got to pay attention to those things and realize when you're starting to get anxious, starting to get depressed, that why am I getting headaches? And see what's going on, what's changed, what's getting overwhelming so that you can deal with it effectively.
And as someone like you who has been in this for so long and understands this, how do you approach somebody who may internally know, but externally not want to admit the stresses that are going on in their life? You have to get that out of them, right? You have to
Right.
explain to them, okay, listen, here's a place where you've got to be truthful and honest about what's happening in your life, because the only way to positively change this and address it is to be honest in an environment that the last thing people like to do is show weakness or vulnerability.
Yeah.
And your job for many years was to
Right.
come on out.
And one of the things that I did was normalize it. Yeah. And I would use myself. And, and you could see people's eyes get big because, there you are, a professional and done this. Like, you have problem with stress?
Yeah, you're perfect. You're
of
fine.
Course I have. I'm a human being. And normalizing it is one of the biggest ways you can get people to open up. I've been there. I've done that. I hear you. I know. I can understand how difficult that must be for you, and and showing that empathy. And it's amazing. People will open up once you let them know that it's okay, and we're all like that.
So you talk about that first step of normalizing the situation. Let's talk about ways that you are able to help people begin to manage their stress. I imagine there's no magic fix to this whole thing.
Absolutely
but there's
not.
many ways that you can you've built over the many years of doing this that you can help people.
Yeah, it drives me nuts seeing things on TV and Facebook and stuff. This is a magic fix for you. It drives me nuts because there isn't. And if we could put up my thing on holistic, you got to look at it holistic because we're all individuals, and there's some areas we can manage better than others. So we'll start with the environment. There's certain things. One of the things you have to accept the things you can't change. But the things you can. And so you look at what's happening. Is your housing a problem? Is it stressing you out? Are you in an unsafe neighborhood? Are you in an unsafe relationship? And look at the things that is bothering you in that area, and what can you deal? You can't make your noisy neighbors stop, but maybe you can wear earplugs at night, and see what kind of things, what there is that you can actually control and manage, And so environmental, there's lots of things that go into there. like I said, that you can't always deal with, but there is. But one of the things is to make sure you feel safe and healthy. You know, if you're living in a home with black mold, you need to get out of there. You know, and just make sure that those things. And sometimes you got to make tough choices
Yeah.
and everything, but you got to make sure of that. The next one is your intellectual, and that doesn't mean you need to go to college, you know, but you know, if we just sit there and watch TV all day long, that's not stimulating, you know, and so you need to do something, you know, that stimulates you, that's enjoying for you, to find some enjoyment, and not just passively take things in, you know, to seek them. And the thing about all these things that I'm going to be talking about is it stimulates the endorphins that make us happy. There are chemicals and there's certain pathways, and when you trigger those pathways, they go straight to those endorphins, and it automatically makes you feel better. You might not go from 10 to 100, but you'll certainly go up. And the more you do it, the more those endorphins will go, and the better you're going to feel about things, and the less stress.
Boy, I could have used you when I was 30 years old. When you say that, and I think about time in my life, and a lot of people, I've been through a lot of podcasts at this point, and obviously people know that I've run across the country. You know, people know that I did that at age 31, 32. Well, I think about age 30, and I remember one of the first blogs I wrote during my run early was me talking about how for so long I was just existing. I was a passive member in my own life, somebody who did just sit around all day watching TV, doing nothing, didn't really have any motivation to change that, and how you just get in that rut. And I was in a rut, a very, very bad rut. Now, I don't suggest running across the country to get out of that, but I do think when you said that, when you say, you know, you don't want to be just a passive that was
and
so
people
true.
would think, oh, what a great life. That's laid back, cool. But it isn't. It's stressful because you are not meeting those internal needs. And we have internal needs that need to be met. And we need to be active to do that, you know, and participate. And like I said, it's different for all of it. Like I said, not everybody's going to run across the country like you did. But we need to find something that's going to work for ourselves, you know, so that we can reach that more healthy and that well-being feeling that we need.
So we've got environmental and intellectual. Sorry, I had that.
Oh
side
no,
note
that
when
was
you,
wonderful.
when
That's
you
a
said
perfect
that,
example of it.
I just
you
had
know?
to bring that in.
And then the next one is spiritual. And again, that doesn't mean you got to go to church, but believing that something beyond us is very healthy. And you know, and practicing what you believe, you know, whether it's being a Christian or a Buddhist, but really trying to practice, you know, the 8 limbs or, you know, the golden rule, whatever it is. And, you know, and being able to really feel good spiritually. That can be very stress relieving, you know. And for Christians, you know, believing that, you know, God has it for you is, you know, and that power of prayer, you know, can be very stress relieving, you know. But like I said, you don't have to be. The Buddhist has other beliefs, you know, all of these, Islam has these beliefs that are very, very important. But once again, you got to be active.
Yeah.
You know, just saying, I believe this, you know, well, that's nice, but what are you doing with it? You know? So you have to be active once again in it. And then the next one is financial, you know?
Oh, here we go.
Does your finances keep you up at night? If it does, do something, you know? And we are bombarded. We're such a consumerism society, and we're bombarded. Not that this would be nice. It's you need this, you know, and this will make your life wonderful. And you're bombarded with it every way you go, TV, radio, Facebook, all of that, you know? And so you really have to take stock of where your money's going, you if you've already got yourself in a pile of debt, go to one of those good, reputable debt places and get yourself under control, because that huge stressor, huge stressor, and people on fixed incomes, very difficult. But there's resources out there, and find them in the community and network to help you out to meet your meet your needs and everything. So anything that's keeping you up at night, that should be number one that you address, number one, because that's your biggest stressor, because that's not why you're sleeping, or if it wakes you up in the middle of the night and that's what's on your mind, but finances for a lot of people is a huge stressor, a huge stressor. And then the next one is social. We are not made to be alone. We are social beings, and it's important to have networking and friends and family. One of the things I see in my fitness classes in the morning, the majority are retired people, not everybody, but I've had people come in, looking down, shuffling, because they've been isolated up a holler. Maybe their spouse died and they just, kind of gave up and didn't want to go out. Different reasons and things that people have. They come to a class within 3 weeks. They're walking and talking and having a great time, because of the socialization, not just because they're physically active, but that social part is so important. And that's the coolest thing about working at the gym. It's such a friendly place. Everybody is so nice. Everybody speaks to you. I've seen people stay an extra hour just talking to each other, and that's good, because we don't have a lot of places to network with people. You got the bar, the church, and Walmart. That's about all we got to socialize.
Of those three, I'd pick the gym. How about that?
Yeah, and and so we are so blessed to have this gym, because it is a great place, and it's a good place to bring your neighbor. Let's go do this at the gym, and stuff. But socialization's important, and family is part of that. And a lot of people rely on their family, but a lot of families are dysfunctional, and I would tell people all the time, you gotta set boundaries, Just because your mom's your mom doesn't mean you have to have her over for Christmas if last year she came drunk and ruined the whole day. I always said, don't disown your family. That's not the way to go, because things change. People change. I said, but set boundaries, If they're stressing you out, take a break from them till you can handle them, or they've realized that maybe they need to interact with you a different way. You can't make them, but by setting a boundary, they're going to see, well, this isn't working, and they might change, But you can take care of yourself, and only you can do that. And setting boundaries is very important in socialization, that social, to keep stress, because a friend, and if you have a friend that puts you down all the time, is that really a friend?
Ooh, sorry, Swolby.
Well,
In a fun way. The socialization one is a very interesting component of this. And we are not designed to be isolated people. And I wonder, I say you got out at the right time on, how much harder is it seem? It seems so much easier to become isolated nowadays because of, the advances in technology and the way things happen. I mean, you think about it. I was talking with Doug Mintz. He's like, you can DoorDash food to your house. And they'll leave it on your door. You don't even interact with the person bringing you the food. You can get Netflix at home. All these things designed to be efficient, obviously, but what they also do is they tend to isolate people.
And guess what? The rates of anxiety and depression are skyrocketing, because we are not meant to live that way. But it's so, like you said, so easy to do that.
Well, in our small little community and with this Prescription for Your Health program, obviously this is something. And we just spoke with Cheryl Tolley, who's also one of the employees here and one of the trainers here who runs classes. And she mentioned to me the socialization aspect that she just sees. And I would have never thought of it that way.
Right. Right.
but there is a
Yeah, I
socialization
take one of
component
her
to it.
classes, and she can hardly get us to quit talking in the pool to give us instructions, you know, because we're having a great time, you know. Yeah, you want us to do this? You know?
I mentioned my mom and Aunt Janet. I'm surprised they either ever
Right,
stopped
right.
talking in the pool.
But it is. It's very, very social. And I guess because you're relaxed, you have a common goal, you know, and it's so non-judgmental. And people think,
Yeah.
oh, I can't come to the gym because I look like this or can't do this. It is so non-judgmental. It's amazing. You'd think of any place, this would be the place people are judging you and looking at.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not. Everybody's glad that you're here, you know, and that includes the other clientele and the staff. I mean, it's just a very warm and welcoming place.
We're all fighting the good fight when it comes to our health,
exactly,
right?
exactly. Trying to stay healthy.
Obviously, socialization, there are good forms of socialization.
Right.
There are forms that are probably a little less good or detrimental or whatever it is. So
Right.
some of those positive outlets, and this is a great positive
It
outlet.
is.
So,
It's
yeah.
you know, and like I said, anybody, you know, for all ages, but I think it's 14 and up. It's just so good. 'Cause I love coming in the evenings for my yoga class and see all those teenagers there.
Yeah.
Instead of being home on their video games and on their phones and stuff, they're here lifting weights, and it's very social with them. They're all interacting and stuff. So it is, and especially in a small community like ours where we don't have a lot of places to get out and go to. This is a wonderful place. And like I said, I can see it with my people, just the difference. I just had another man, a widow, that started coming in here and just saying how, in 1 week's time, how much better he felt. Yeah. Well, physically, you're not going to change that much in a week.
Exactly.
But socially, yes, you can. I mean, it can be immediate. You know, to see a bunch of smiles and good morning, how you doing, makes a big difference instead of just sitting in front of that TV.
Sorry, I keep veering off on the topics, but yes.
No, this is great.
So those are some very good ones at the most. So we've got the environmental, we've got the intellectual, we've got the financial, and we've got the social. There are 4 more. Let's continue with this.
Occupation, you know, and that again doesn't mean you have to work, but we are meant to do things, you know, and so just the simple things, even as going and checking on your neighbor, you know, volunteering. There's all kinds of volunteer opportunities out there, you know, and, you know, being able to feel worthwhile and having some kind of job, you know, volunteer, makes you feel worthwhile. And that's very important for us. And once again, all these things help reduce stress when we feel good about ourselves. If you are working, don't get caught up in all that office politics and gossip. You know?
Please do not, yes.
You know, that can be a horrible stressor. You're there to do a
water
job.
cooler conversations, right?
Really, right, really. You're there to do a job. Do your job and let that stuff go. You know, if they're talking about you, you know, you're keeping them from talking about somebody else. You know, just do your job and get out of there and enjoy your life and stuff. It's easy to get caught up in all of that. And so, you know, then the big one is, you know, our emotional, you know. The thing about distress is it zaps your energy. I mean, just so that then when something bad happens, negative happens, you just don't have that energy to deal with it. So it's very important to take care of those emotions. And there's no bad emotions. It's what we do with them. Everybody gets down. Everybody gets scared and distressed and anxious, you know. Those are just common parts of life. But do we go and drink over it, you know, do drugs over it, yell at the kids over it, whatever, you know, what we do with it. And so we really need to watch that emotional. And I feel emotion and physical activity go hand in hand.
Really?
Because one of my things when I would have strong emotions, anger, you know, I would take a walk. If I had a bad day, walk. And I mean, I'd walk, you know. I remember one time being stressed out. And it happened late in the evening, and I was walking at like midnight. It's a nice bright night. I was, I can't walk at night. I sure can. I'm not going to fall over the hill. There's enough moonlight for me, but I'm taking a walk.
Is it a walk until you unclench your teeth?
That's right.
Is that what it is?
And I didn't slap anybody upside the head, I did good. So you got to find, how do I get that strong emotion out? And, once again, having this outlet as the fitness, the wellness center is a wonderful way, to come here and just daily to keep that energy level up, to be able to work out any strong emotions we have. So it's very, very important. A big part of motion, too, though, is the opposite, is that total relaxation. And that's where yoga and the stretch classes come in, is just to get it out in a very calming way. Yeah. Meditation, guided imageries, listening to these musics of nature, or they're just the different sounds they have. Any of those things, just kind of zen, get calm and let it out. So either way, and that's again what works for you. Yeah. I have to get it out physically, but some people just need to quiet down and center. And, that's fine. But find what works for you and use it, And if you're going to go into a stressful situation, maybe you went from one of those crazy families and got to go to the reunion, prepare yourself. Get yourself calm. I can stand it. It's going to be okay, and get yourself prepared for it. It's very important.
An anecdote to that, I have a really, really good friend. I won't mention his name. He wouldn't care that I did, but he lived what I would be considering a stressful 20s and even 30s in different ways. In his 20s, wild and untamed, all that. And then, of course, met who would become his wife. And, you have a wife, you have kids, you have a job, you have a mortgage, you have all this stuff going on, and the chaos that ensues with that. And I remember him having a conversation with me, and that would have been 7 years ago now, where he said, I know it sounds crazy, and it didn't to me, but there's that stigma, I guess he felt like, that he found meditation.
Right.
He found positive affirmations in the morning, and he said that he had been doing it for 6 or 7 months. He said it has absolutely changed his existence and how he manages stress. And how he's been able to manage stress. And that was the Kickstarter to him becoming a better father, a better husband, a better worker, a more focused worker, and
holistic,
a physically healthy individual, probably in better shape right now than I would say even in high school, which is hard to believe. But just finding meditation. And again, it doesn't have to necessarily be meditation.
Right.
That's why I think yoga, we'll veer off here into this yoga conversation.
Yes.
You teach yoga classes here.
Yes.
Is there a meditation portion of yoga, or would you call it that?
No, we don't meditate. We do guided imagery, which is different. But what we do is at the last 10 minutes of the class, we have these nice lavender eye pillows, and we warm them in this nice little oven the Wellness Center has provided us. And we all get into what's called savasana. It's corpse pose. You just lay down, get comfortable, and then I take them and you look at the starry sky, or I take you out to the lake and you visualize the lake, and have lots of calming words and talking about relaxation, so that you, again, holistically, emotionally, intellectually, physically, just getting everything calm, and you stay there for 10 minutes, and then we bring you back out of it, which is different than meditation and stuff.
You ever have anybody snore on you?
Almost, yes. And people don't want to get up. They want to stay there for an hour. It's so relaxing. And I've had people, years after I've had them, back when I taught it 20 years ago, tell me they can still hear my voice during that time, that calming voice, and it's very important. And that's a really good practice to have right before you go to bed, because sleep is a huge thing, and we don't sleep well as Americans and stuff, and some of the things with sleep is, write out your worries. It's something crazy about writing things down. Don't type it into your to-do list. Write it out. and that physically helps get them out. Okay, I know what my worries are. I know what my to-do is, and then give yourself a guided imagery, or listen to some of that music to help you relax and really get ready to fall asleep and stuff. But yeah, yoga and meditation are amazing, amazing things. The thing with yoga is it gets you physically relaxed along to be able to get mentally relaxed, because we're stretching and holding and breathing and doing all of these things to relax our body. And so by the time you get to the mat for your savasana, it's just like, oh, okay, I feel good, and you're ready just to let go, and it's very natural. And yeah, people almost fall asleep all the time.
Yeah, I'm looking at the side eye right now. My buddy Swolby, who's running the stuff here, and he looks like he's about to fall asleep just even listening to this part of it.
Really, it is.
Maybe meditation's coming for you, buddy.
Stuff.
All right.
It's
Sorry, I keep interrupting, but
I love it.
These are such interesting topics.
Because other things that help us is hobbies, to have something, because that's one way I was able to not go over the edge with my work. Is my hobby is flower gardens. And by going home and seeing my plants grow and bloom, I could see the results, because I couldn't always see results. Maybe I planted a seed, and 10 years from now, that seed will take root and they'll do well. Maybe not, and stuff, And so that was something mentally, and physically, to help me deal with accepting the fact that I'm not in control of their lives. All I can do is give them information, empathy, guidance, those kind of things. But it's up to them to make the decision and what they're going to do with their life, And so that was really therapeutic for me. So you got to find something that resonates with you. Woodworking, fishing, whatever it may be.
Anything that becomes like a tangible thing that
that you can see, and it is. Hobbies are wonderful, and there's so many out there now, and but it is, because you can say, I did that, I caught that fish, I made that scrapbook page, whatever it is. So hobbies is a real good way for emotional to take care of ourselves emotionally.
I shot 130 on the golf course.
Yeah, right. We're good.
Of course,
really.
Some people would say that that's more of a stressor, playing golf.
It's the way you look at it. It's the way you look at it. And then, of course, the last one is physical. Once again, that sedentary lifestyle. I am sure your doctors all talked about how detrimental that is to your heart, your circulation, your nervous, everything. Yeah. We got to get up and be active, And the easiest, cheapest thing to do is walk.
Yes.
You don't have to power walk, just walk. And we live in a safe area that is safe to walk. And we have wonderful walking trails all over. And the work they've done on Ben's Run is unbelievable. It's like a state park now. I mean,
it's a spider web of trail systems.
Oh, it is.
Now. It's crazy.
Yeah. But but if you're not able to do the trails on the hill, just doing that loop is so beautiful now. I was out there this morning and saw 6 different flowers in bloom, wildflowers. Trilliums, the May-apples, wild geraniums, and it just makes you feel good. And they've done studies where walking outside is, I forget how much better for your mood than on a treadmill.
Oh yes. Let me just say, I am currently in my millionth personal journey of physical health. I will tell you that. Doing it the smarter way, the slower and steadier way this time. But I do notice a difference, and it's a marked difference just in the way I approach the rest of the day. If I have to, well, I don't say have to, but if the weather's terrible and I just get it done here on the treadmill.
Right.
Still, I get the exercise. But when I walk, let's say the St. John's walking trail instead, it is a marked difference in how I feel afterwards. Mentally,
yes,
and I don't know if it's feel like a mouse on a cage or whatever it is.
And it's nature really makes you release those good endorphins. I mean, it does. You might be tired, but there's an energy about it where you feel good. The fresh air. I mean, just all of it really affects us in a much more positive way. But like you said, weather, and we've had a terrible winter, because you don't want to be out there on ice and snow, because no matter how young and fit you are, if you fall, you can break something,
Yeah.
but we have wonderful places, and then of course we have the fitness center. But just being active, it can make such a difference in our life, So we have to. Everybody needs to do assessment. And you talked about how I got people to talk. We would do an assessment and see what areas that we could build on. And Kim said that in her podcast about you know yourself the best, and and we want to look at those strengths. So build on those things. How can we incorporate more things to help get us where our goal is and everything. But looking at it holistic, there is no easy fix. We got to look at all of our areas to manage that stress.
And generally speaking, when I look at those 8 different tenets of the types of stresses, every single one of those very easy to be impactful in somebody's life. When somebody would come to you, or whenever you were speaking with somebody like that, I can't imagine, was there ever somebody who was just like, yeah, it's just the one thing? Or was, generally speaking, it's a combination of 4, 5, 6, even all 8 of them?
My clients usually had a lot of stressors going on and stuff. And one of the things, there's some things that you can't change, and your past is a stressor for a lot of people and stuff. And what I really would concentrate is our self-talk. There's 2 evil sentences that we tell ourselves. I can't stand it, and it should or shouldn't be this way. And they're both big, fat lies, because there's only one thing in our life we can't stand, and that's what kills us. Other than that, we make it through.
Yeah.
We might not make it through it very beautifully, but we make it through.
Yeah.
And we're not in charge. So it should have happened, And so if you can learn to get those 2 things under control, your stress will go way down. Because I might get frustrated, I might get angry over this, but I can't stand it. And I'll tell you how powerful words are by using myself an example. When my daughter was just learning to drive, got a driver's license, she wanted to go down to Charleston, out Quarter G, to a movie and all of this stuff. At that time, we had had 5 young people in town in the county killed in car accidents.
Yes.
To me, that was a life and death decision if I let that girl go. I mean, life or death, and stuff. And so my husband and I said no. Well, she comes downstairs, crying, and she was appropriate, though. I think I deserve to go. I make my own money and good grades and all this. And so I'm a softie, and so I go to get my husband, and we all 3 sitting there, and he's asking her their questions. How are you going to get there, and she doesn't even know the interstate number, And I'm over there, and I say to myself, I can't stand it. And I hit my head on the counter and passed out. 3 evil words. I can't stand it. Shut myself down.
Yeah.
Because we got to keep a light at the end of the tunnel. We can go through anything if we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Because that's what suicide is. They shut off the light. I can't stand it. It's always going to be this, and never, it shouldn't, all of that negative talk. And they shut off the light. I shut off my light. I can't stand it. I couldn't deal with it, So I shut my whole body down.
So the ultimate stress.
The ultimate stress, as you collapse.
Yeah.
And, and once again, I'm doing everything to relieve my stress, but obviously I was stressed with 2 teenagers.
Can't imagine
that.
Yeah, imagine that. Stress with kids.
And stuff. And that's what I said. I could manage my stress at work as long as things at home as well. But, you have those 2 things going on. So it's easy to get overwhelmed. And these are things I would share to normalize.
Yes.
So that people know everybody gets stressed, and we all have our moments that we don't do well.
I think about that. I think about, when I was growing up and I became a teenager, and my sister was a couple years older than me. And, of course, she was a high school freshman, sophomore girl who was just madly in love with this guy, and this is the end-all, be-all. And Mom and Dad didn't know anything. And then I remember when I got into that phase of you guys don't know anything, and I always share this with them, and I share this with other people. I said, it's amazing the older I get, the smarter my parents have
That's right.
become.
That's right.
They were idiots when I was in high school. What
Exactly.
happened?
What did they know? Really,
Yeah, I
really.
think about that many times, and
Yeah.
of course, I every once in a while I'll just say, "Hey, sorry, Mom." She'd be like, "What for?" And I'd be like, for all the times back in the day.
Just being me.
So yeah, that can be stressful for parents. But,
Yeah.
as you
But
said, normalizing
yeah,
your own stress.
life is tough.
Yes.
It really is, and we have to recognize that and accept it, and then but take responsibility for it and look at what ways can I manage things and do things different to take care of myself. Because another thing is self-care is never a selfish act, and especially women think they're being selfish by taking time to themselves, especially if their children are little. But you can, just like the airplane thing, you got to put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on your kid. You got to take care of yourself so you can take care of your
I
children.
wonder about that situation specifically with women who specifically may are mothers. Is it a maternal instinct thing that really does? It is that I have to take care of everybody else.
Yes, that is innate, but then our society too, and even though, I grew up in the 60s and, women's lib and the men were supposed to do all this stuff and everything, and it's gotten better. Yeah. But for the majority, what has happened is not only are we taking care of the home and the children, we are working.
Yes.
So women have it awful. They really do, because my mom didn't work till my youngest brother was 4, and she just took care of the home. But now we still take care of the majority. Like I said, I've seen a few husbands.
Yeah.
I have a huge family, and one niece has a fantastic husband. It's like, whoa, where did you get him? But the majority, the baby's crying. Oh, it's a poopy diaper.
Yeah, that one.
Things really haven't changed, and that's cultural, and it's been there forever and everything. But we do have we tend to be the caretaker. Men are protectors, and that is innate and to a part and cultural part too.
And still it's there. So
yes, it's there. So you got to recognize it.
Yeah.
And so if it's, if it is overwhelming, your partner, you might have to have a real, I need you, and you got to be specific.
Yes.
Because men we're
simple creatures.
That's right. Don't assume they're going to know. Tell them exactly what you need. I need you to do this so I can do this.
I say it may be cliche, but we're knuckle dragging cavemen. All right, you gotta explain it to us so we can get it.
And that's another thing we do. We assume people understand and know and read our mind and stuff. We don't. Be assertive. Yeah. That's a biggest stress reliever, is being assertive. Because if you're not, then you're being either passive aggressive, and you get bad results either. Passive people get people walked on. Aggressive people, everybody can't stand you. Neither one is a good result. Say what you do, because you're not responsible. If I say something to you assertively, I'm not responsible for your reaction. Yeah. You are, And so, but I have to take care of myself. And telling people what you need and want and think is important. And again, because it's a stress reducer. At least they know.
Yeah.
At least they know how I feel. At least they know. And then you have a decision to either accept how they respond, continue to be miserable, or make a change. Yeah. You have 3 choices, and you put it back on yours instead of blaming everybody else for your misery. So it's important to bring it back to yourself.
So we think about all of the things that you've learned, and again, things come out over the 40 years of your career portion of that. And as you said, you've now retired from that portion of your life, but you are still being able to utilize all the knowledge you have with these yoga classes here.
Yes.
You're able to impart that knowledge of de-stressing and positive ways to look at things. But let's look at it in terms of, let's say somebody is dealing with this and somebody wants some help. Somebody out there maybe sees this podcast and they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't think about this, but this is stressing me. This is stressing me. I really am not dealing with it the right way. What are the resources for people who are out there and about in our community, at least, who may want to find help with that? Where are the resources? Again, you're now retired.
Yeah,
so
really. And unfortunately,
where are the resources?
I've never been replaced at my agency. They have no therapists at that agency. But we have the one downtown,
Okay.
And I don't know if and Westbrook. And Westbrook's been there forever. And
Yeah.
those probably are only as far as therapy and counseling. We don't have very many support groups.
Yeah.
We have AA, of course, but those are things that we do lack, and then that's again a reason to come up here and get the informal.
Yeah, I
the
think about
informal.
that. It's kind of a segue that I wanted here. Is that one of the things we're talking about? How can exercise improve your overall health and wellness? As you mentioned earlier in the podcast, you talked about all those negative things that come
Yes.
with distress.
Right.
Well, if you're able to get to the gym, if you're able to start the process of even the Prescription for Your Health program, not only will you get the ability to help physically, which also de-stresses you, you'll be able to talk with health coaches. You'll be able to talk
Right.
with dietitians about your
Right.
nutrition, which is also an important part
Right.
of becoming well
Yes.
and helping with the stress. So even though you're not open for business 24/7 when it comes to counseling
Right.
people like that, you can still suggest people come up here, whether it's
Right,
yoga or
right,
not.
right.
Come up here
Right.
and start this program.
Because it's kind of like my clients that I would get that, especially a referral from the doctor, and they didn't want to get on medication for depression or whatever. And I would tell them, okay, we'll give this 3 months, and and if you really work on all the things that I teach you, suggest to you, and you're doing well, you don't need it. But if 3 months, if you're still stuck and really depressed, then you probably need an antidepressant. So I would suggest to people, come up here, give this a try, get social, work on these things that we talked about, and give yourself a couple months. And if you're still stuck in a bad place mood-wise, anxiety-wise, health-wise, then go see someone. A physician, the physician can help make referrals for you, and go see this. But this is a great place to start. And because like you said, the health coach, Kim has, a ton of experience too, to be able to help you, send you in the right direction. So that it is, because we're all very holistic, and Doug has done a great job of getting so many of these aspects of the circle here of all the of our, the dynamics of our well-being and everything. He's covered a lot of them and stuff.
I think about it when I talk with the people who are involved in this program in whatever version they are, whether it be Kim or you or Cheryl or Kyle, any of these people who are working this program, they all say the same thing. If not for the backing of Doug Bentz,
Oh, yeah.
the serious backing, and again, he has been so good to us, and he's been so open with his own journey.
Right.
And again, as you said, normalizing it. You think, oh, you're a CEO of a
Right,
hospital
right.
system. You don't have any issues.
Yeah, he's got it all together.
Yeah, well, we
Right,
find that everybody is dealing with their own
Yeah,
issues,
yes.
and an opportunity awaits you here with this Prescription for Your Health. I got one more question I want to ask you, but before I do, I wanted to see if there was anything that you wanted to highlight that I have missed as we've gone
I
through this
think we actually
conversation.
covered everything.
Yeah.
To
That
me,
makes me feel good about myself. 'Cause
yes,
usually
you did
I'm
an
bad at
excellent
that.
job. Again, if you were going to start someplace, I would look at anything that's keeping you up at night, that really bothering you, and trying to get a plan how to do that, and getting physically active, and walking, coming up here, doing something physically active, and because those will, taking care of the problem will reduce the stress. Getting active is going to increase your endorphins. And so between the two of them, you're going to see change in a short time.
Well, I think you may have answered my last question mostly. And the question is, what are the top things that someone who is distressed, what do they need to concentrate on? And obviously, as you said, become physically active, number one.
Yes.
Are there any other things that you would suggest right away for people?
Yeah, and really examine your self-talk. People, it's going constantly, and we don't pay attention to it. But see, how much stuff are you saying I can't stand? How much are you saying it shouldn't be this way? That negative self-talk. Take a hold of that and look at that. And we called it reframing it. putting it, I can stand it.
Yeah.
I might have all these emotions,
Yeah.
but those emotions are okay. And then once you look at that, then you can come up with a plan to deal with those emotions better instead of in a negative way. How can I make that the best of it? Getting healthy relationships, being assertive, taking care of yourself. Those things are just essential.
One thing I want people to do is if they can go back to, we were talking about the 8 tenets of stress. And I tell you what, they're all extremely relevant. You may be experiencing out there 3, 4, 5, maybe you're experiencing all 8 in your life. Look at those things. Listen to the podcast. Listen to someone who's got 40 years of experience with it, who knows positive ways to address and deal with it. Again, be assertive, be honest with yourself, go talk to people. There are people around. We invite you to get involved with the Prescription for Your Health program because within that, you can do a lot of the things that Susan talked about. You can go to the gym. You can go to yoga and learn some meditation techniques. You could talk with Kim Mertz about your health and your life coaching. And, there are so many things that are such a positive way to deal with stress when it comes to this program. Susan Greathouse, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. We could talk again, and I'm sure we probably will about more and more things. If you guys want to get involved with the yoga classes, when can they get involved with those here?
They're 5:30 on Tuesday and Thursday, and I do 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings. So.
There you go, Susan Greathouse. Thank you so much.